Welcome to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast all about stories of safety leadership, presented by Dale Carnegie and the Board of Certified Safety Professionals.
Today, Jay, we are going to speak to a gentleman whose organization affects a whole lot of lives. And whether they're in a particular region, the listeners are in a particular region where this gentleman's organization affects them like he does, they're somewhere, and the services his company provides affects people. And so that's why we're excited about him being here.
Yep. And we are thrilled to have John Fischer of Duke Energy out of Charlotte, North Carolina. He's their Director of Environmental Health and Safety. And welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. I'm a fan, so now I can actually play a different role and try to contribute.
Well, John, why don't you tell us briefly about your career to this point and get us started? Tell us about yourself, how you landed at Duke Energy, what's going on, man.
Yeah, so I think I've been doing this for around 25 years. Half of it's been consulting. The other half has been in energy. There aren't very many sectors that I haven't seen at this point. And my background is actually environmental toxicology. And then I was working for a small consulting firm in San Diego. And the CEO came in and we had a big project for San Diego State University, and they needed a safety guy. And so I didn't even know what a safety guy was back then. And they came in and they said, hey, Fisher, what do you know about safety? And I said, well, I took a class in college. And I said, oh, great. Well, we got a new project, man.
You can do it
for a safety guy like you. And so that was my introduction into safety was at San Diego State a long time ago, and working on lockout, tagout. You could go do a LOTO program. And I said, well, why do you got to do the lottery if you're doing safety? Like, what does this even mean? And so it's been a long journey, but I've learned a lot. So
you're going from San Diego to Charlotte, and many spots in between?
Many spots in between. What I would share with you is I originally was born and raised in Detroit, and then was out in San Diego, came back to Detroit. And so some people were questioning my sanity at that point. And so one of the vice presidents of HR came down in my new hire orientation when I came back to Detroit from San Diego and said, hey, I got to meet this guy, John Fischer. And I thought to myself, man, this is my first day. How am I in trouble already? He goes, no, man, I just had to see the guy that actually moved from San Diego to Detroit. I had to meet you.
Well, I'm just curious that when you got started in that role with your one class under your belt in college, what were some of your initial impressions? Because we have people that listen to this podcast who they're starting in their role. They're fairly new. What were some of the eye-opening experiences that encouraged you or said, wow?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I was thinking about this, just kind of reflecting with someone that I mentor. And I think the number one thing I would say is my takeaway, and, I know some people may or may not be offended with this, was my introduction into safety. I thought, well, safety is really a sales job. It isn't the technical stuff that everyone is struggling with. So in that particular project, we were looking at machine guarding and lockout, tagout, and some other things, and trying to figure out why the trades and the craft folks weren't executing on, these tasks. And so it wasn't a gap in the actual material. The material was solid. It was all regulatorily compliant. It had everything in there, the components of an effective program, but no one ever actually had got any buy-in from the employees. And so they're saying, oh man, we got this problem. Nobody's doing it. And we're having these events. And so I was thinking to myself, the material itself, it's not real difficult. But these people don't understand how to apply it. And so they don't even know if they want to apply it because it's different. And California, as you guys know, is a different kind of regulatory state sometimes in their approaches. And so when you look at that, I thought to myself, this isn't so much about is the material accurate? This is, do these people actually want to do this? And how do we get them into that?
Isn't that an interesting perspective of what a salesperson does? And we'll start looking at some Carnegie quotes here. who said, principle 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. And so Carnegie said that the whole goal is, rather than you just telling somebody to do something, can you stir up that want to so that somebody chooses to do it? Now, where'd you go with that, Mr. Sales Safety Man? How'd
Yeah.
you
And
make
so,
that happen?
you have to translate that into, how does this affect them personally? So why do you want to do this? And so you're building a business case, in your head, but really it's almost a sales pitch of why the machines, the equipment, the regulations, things have changed. So whether it's safe starts, whether it's lockout, tagout, whether it's the fact that there's two energy sources feeding this piece. And so if you do it the old way, it doesn't mean that you're actually safe. Trying to make them understand, in order for you to go home in the same condition you came in or better condition, you're going to need to do these things. And so, if you choose path A, this is what that looks like. Not a great not a great outcome. If you choose path B, much better outcome. And so that is how, I'm not a big, full disclosure, I'm not a huge discipline kind of guy. I don't think you kind of win hearts and minds with, kind of that authoritative approach. And so over the course of time, and what ends up happening, and you guys may know this, but is that you get a couple of early adopters and then the snowball starts rolling. And then at the end of the day, everybody's in there. And so in a union environment, you go after the business agent, you go after, the shop steward. And as soon as you get that one, then the rest come along.
Now, this guy just dropped some words of wisdom right there, Jay. What do you want to comment on? What else you want to know about that?
Well, that was a great way to dramatize your ideas, which was what I was searching for in the car ride over here with you today. And I just saw my notes, and I was laughing a little bit as a seasoned EHS professional, John, because you started out with, some safety professionals are not going to like this. And I just was like, oh, here we go. And then if you hang on to your story, the lesson learned there about it is sales, because we know it's right. We know we're technically what needs to be done to prevent and eliminate risk. But after that, it's all about getting the money and the financial resources to save the day. And I think that's a great lesson for all EHS professionals or others to hear, depending on what they're doing. I thought that was really well said. I haven't heard it put like that in a while, and it's a great reminder of what we struggle with all the time. And I think we should keep leaning into that in here with John for sure.
And John, as you know, as a veteran, there are many people in the safety profession. I'll even add the HR profession also, that say, what we do is so important. How come I can't get the people above me to listen to me? How come I can't get them to back my initiatives and everything like that? What else have you learned about sales that could help people to see that perspective? Can you add anything else to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at safety and making sure you have that buy-in, I think, you made a comment earlier about learning, Merle. I think learning comes in three components. And, I know Carnegie as well supports this. Component number one is that buy-in, that curiosity. Like, you have to want to learn. There's books on all kinds of things, but if you don't want to learn, then you're not going to learn. It doesn't matter how many books there are. And so you got to want to learn, and then you acquire that knowledge. So that's books, that's podcasts, that's mentorships, that's a variety of avenues. And then the third thing is put it into practice, right? So if you go and you watch a YouTube video on how to change your oil, and you're like, man, that was a great video, but you don't try it, you didn't really fully learn anything because you never put it into practice. And so in order for learning to come, it's got to be those three components. And so when you look at acquiring resources, that's where you shift into this kind of the sales, or what I'll call more like relationship-based acquisitions, I'll say. And what you're trying to acquire are those relationships through those discussions on who are the key stakeholders in what I'm trying to do. And so, we've, as EHS professionals, you're never I have not heard too many stories about, man, I got to tell you, I am flush with resource. I got all these people. I don't know what to do.
Oh, I know. Every other podcast we've had, they've said that. So you're the kind of the odd duck.
I know one
Oh,
podcast they didn't say
So
that.
maybe I'm the exception here, but I have not had that problem thus far in my career. And so the question is, and to your point about HR, so if you look, and I'm giving a speech on this in a couple of weeks, is, the rise of the chief human resource officer, off the charts. The rise of the CISO with cybersecurity, off the charts. What I would say, somebody kind of snuck in and stole some of our EHS thunder. The rise of the chief sustainability officer, 1,000% over the last 15 years. Who hasn't been rising is the chief EHS officer, which is probably flat or decreasing at this point, right? And the difference is marketing and communication. They can tell their story. And so if you look at how you go about your conversations and these relationships, if I go to my CFO and I say, hey, I've got this great idea. I need $10 million and, it's going to prevent injuries. We would all like to think, man, that's great. I'll give it to you. Hang on a minute. Let me get my pen ready to write the check.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not going to happen. And so because it's not digested in a way that particular audience understands, they're never going to come out and say, hey, we want to injure people, or hey, we just don't think that that's worth it. You're never going to get that. But they're balancing. It's similar to a story what I'd tell is early on in my career, walking into a plant manager's office, having an issue with a confined space, thinking it was going to, let's stop the job, let's do this. This is really, really important. Not having a really firm grasp of understanding of operations. It wasn't as important as I thought it was. But he said to me, okay, you're the sixth guy that's come in here, or gal that's come in here. So HR's got a problem. INC has a problem. Ops has a problem. Some guy from corporate, some kind of initiative, they've got a problem. So where is your problem in those problems, Fischer? And so if I need to rank, because I can't solve them all right now, where does your problem rank? And it gave me a different perspective on what plants are dealing with every day.
And John, that is something that every safety professional needs to keep in mind, because we see our piece of the pie and say, it's got to be done. It's got to be done. And it does. Not minimizing that. But the person in charge, it doesn't mean they don't care about what we got to say. But it's like, I'm pulled every which way. And you're just one of the pulls. And we don't like that.
One thing to consider is, so if you go back and you have a relationship and you've built that relationship and you have that trust, then your voice is amplified, right? So the person from corporate probably doesn't have that relationship at the local level. And so, but the operations folks at that plant, they probably do. So again, he or she is trying to rank where your problem sits in that.
And there's another principle that I'll inject here that you're inferring, is to try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. We so much look at, well, this is how I see it, and safety is important. It's drilled in us, and it is. But to say, what if I were sitting in the seat of that operations chief operating person? What if I were sitting in their seat? What would it be like? What would I be experiencing? And then, John, if you took that perspective, what ways might you craft these stories? How might you craft a way to be more persuasive and sell? What do you think?
Well, I think what I would do, what I have done, is really do exactly what you talk about, Merle, is put myself in their shoes. It's one of 100 things that they're dealing with. It might be number one for us, but it might be 32 on their list, right? And so they've got to figure out where they want to place those resources. So in the selling component, I know I got to be careful because other people are like clicking the off button right now because they don't like the word sell. But
hang in there, people. Hang in there, folks.
In the buy-in component, let's call it buy-in, is trying to translate it into a language that audience understands. And so if you're looking at, human and organizational performance, you hear a lot about HOP, feels like every conference, 50% HOP, and it's almost getting to a point where it's a buzzword and people might tone that out, but there's really good stuff in there. If you shift that kind of HOP language into operational excellence, and when I talk about engaging a crew at a local level to ensure we have the right procedures and approach and equipment and delivery, I actually save money on that job. I optimize it. I cut down rework. That has a cost savings associated with it. So if I'm going and I'm trying to get a HOP program or something like that, I don't really want to call it that. And I know, some academics would disagree, but I want to call it, here's how we integrate an operating philosophy so that we can be more effective in the field with the resources that we have. And here, if we do A, it yields B benefit, certainly reduces injuries, but we also show that there are cost savings because we have allowed the crews to design the work that they do every single day to help feed into a work management platform of how we order parts. So now our delivery times are cut down and they understand the area. So we don't have trucks driving by each other and waving at, hey, how's it going? And so you cut that waste out. And so if I'm talking to a chief operating officer or a VP of zone operations, that's the kind of dialogue, selling, buy-in, whatever we want to call it, that I'm going to use with them because that's a language they understand. I can't just go in there and kind of rookie mistake. Hey, we're going to prevent 3 injuries today. Great. That's kind of price of admission, ticket price kind of thing. We're supposed to do that. So that you're not setting the world on fire.
And Jay, you know what else that he's implying too? You talk about 3 injuries. But what he's doing is he is taking the numbers and he is telling the story behind the numbers. There's not just numbers on the paper. Those numbers represent human beings, their lives, their family, and they represent a missed opportunity for operational excellence.
And would you say that there's a perfect marriage of operating excellence and the Dale Carnegie principles to be effective in your EHS career?
Yeah, I think that there's a great overlay there. I fundamentally, rules without relationship equal rebellion. So whether
that's a
that
great quote.
is whether
Baby,
that is,
mark it down.
I'm writing that down, John.
And while he's writing that down, and this is not your realm, but I heard a physician talk recently. He said, I don't know what's wrong with these patients. I can't get them to take their medicine. I can't get them to take that blood pressure medicine. And somebody said to the guy, well, what are you telling them? He says, you don't take that, you're going to die. And he said, the doc said, they just ignore me. And then they looked up the research. The number one way that causes people to do what their doctor says, the word is likability.
I was going to say bedside manner. Close.
I like the guy. He asked me to do it. I'll do it. John, is there a room for that likability in being a safety professional?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, people don't care what you know until they know you care, right? Isn't that another cliche that's out there? And I think, so if I go out to a crew, I'll give you an example. So I go out and I was working similar utility role, and I was out with a mentor who's now a CEO at a utility. So she's extremely intelligent. And we were doing lockout tagout work on a boiler feed pump, which is a large motor in a power plant. And I went out there with my clipboard and, all of the don't do this kind of thing. So if you're listening, don't do anything.
He looked the part, didn't he? Yeah.
That's right. And I'm like, you haven't done this and you haven't done that. And look at, how terrible you are. Bad employee, bad employee, bad employee. And she pulled me aside and she was like, hey, I have a question for you. Yeah. She's like, have you ever done that job? I was like, no. Well, so-and-so's done that for 20 years. Right? And yeah. But you're implying that you know more than so-and-so. Like, doesn't that feel weird to you? Life changer. like absolute game changer for me in that when I was on my first utility job. And I was like, you know what? Hang on a minute. I'm going to reverse engineer this. So I'm not going to go out there with anything. I'm just going to ask questions. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to kind of take the risk of hopefully he was doing it right because I don't really know enough about this right now. And what I would encourage you is learn a little bit, but don't do that, but learn a little bit before you go out there. And I'm going to come back and say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? I know that this works. I know the other maintenance tech uses this. And then he's like, John, hang on a minute. Or, earlier in your career, a lot of folks that you're going to be around are tenured. And so, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're maybe going to wrap an arm around you because they feel obligated to teach you something because they're a senior person. And if you go in with a very curious approach, how do you do? Oh man, this is great. They're proud of their work. They'll share it with you. And that's the likability piece. And they're like, hey, that Fischer guy. And the other thing I would tell you in that space is, Union Stewart came up to me and he was like, hey, yeah, I know you're not getting the momentum that you want. Why don't you go on shift? And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, go on shift for 3 months. Understand what the guys and gals are doing. And then let's see how that changes your approach. At first, I'm like, I'm a safety professional. I don't go on shift, right? Yeah. Luckily, I changed my mind about that. So I went on shift and I got to see night shift, day shift, what they do, how they do it. I was doing those activities, made me a much better from a likability, but also from an understanding of, hey, you need to wear all this gear, not recognizing it's 120 degrees. Like, how does that relate to their job? And so it gives you a different perspective of the work, but also they're going to wrap their arm around you thinking you're part of that team, and they'll be more apt to have a conversation.
Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. What a brilliant approach, rather than going telling everybody and being the little general barking it all out. Ask questions out, like you said, the spirit of curiosity. One other principle is let the other person do a great deal of the talking. And John, wasn't that good what he said there, Jay? He said, when you say, how'd you do that? Well, who doesn't want to be able to explain their story of success? And when you listen then, Jay, what are you thinking there?
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That was deep for me.
Yet we hear those things. And John, why do you suppose, I'll bet almost everybody could quote what Jay just said because it's been around. But why do we forget that? What's the temptation that pulls us in not to try to understand?
Like explain your initial resistance.
Yeah, I mean, I think there different personalities, right? And so, you really have to lay pride to the side, and you do know what you're doing. Nobody's really questioning that, but you almost get into where you're in this like proving value, proving knowledge, proving, hey, look, I'm here, I'm the safety person, I'm the environmental person, whatever you are. And so let me explain to you how smart I am, or let me explain to you what I know that you don't know. And I think that becomes, so you get an adversarial relationship right out the gate because a wall goes up. And they're thinking, I don't even know this guy. And I think he's from corporate, which makes it doubly worse.
Oh, yeah.
And so
he's there to help. Yes.
I'm corporate. I'm here to help.
And so I think that, people don't traditionally have that, humility is a gift. And if you go in with an open mind, open heart, seeking to learn, it will unlock so much knowledge for you. But if you have already got it figured out, then that's a problem.
Now, in your career, John, did you stumble across those learnings that you're describing now, or were you lucky enough or fortunate enough to find a mentor to help you along? Like for me, I a lot of what you're saying resonates with me because I really was stumbling through that. I didn't get a mentor early on in my career, and I think it's critical now. And did you have one to help you through those moments of resistance, if you will? Like nowadays, if somebody said to me, you know what, go work at this factory for 10 shifts, come back to me, I would wear that with a badge of honor, right? But like you described when I was 24, I'd have been like, wait, what? So I'm curious if you had anybody to help you along in those difficult times of transition in your career that you described.
Yeah, I think I had a blend, Jay. I was definitely an idiot, and I went out there
Well,
and
that's true confessions.
stumbled.
That
Yeah,
is,
yeah. I stumbled into all kinds of things. There was a time when I was as a consultant, you're paid to go out there and find problems so you can generate business off the problems that you find.
but that's
And
how
so
we
you
all
go
get
out
started.
there and you're like, that's right. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. You guys are terrible. Thank you. Anyways, here's the quote for how we can fix it, right? And so I kind of stumbled into that, and that wasn't very productive, right? I would say in the kind of audit world, I would go and I would pride myself on failing plans, right? So absolutely the wrong thing to do. And so you go out there and you're like, look at this, your audit score is like 25%. You guys are horrible. Like, look at me. I'm a great auditor, right? But that doesn't help anybody. And in fact, it creates even more angst. So that was the stumbling part. Luckily, I did have people pull me to the side and say, hey, look, you're not really a nice person and you're kind of a jerk. And what you're chasing, you're never going to get to because your approach is horrible. And so no one's questioning, like, you can probably recite all the regs from memory, John. Nobody's asking whether you can or can't do that. But if you don't engage the people, then it doesn't really matter what you know because you're going to be unsuccessful in what you're trying to accomplish. Do you really want safety at this workplace? And if you do, you're not going to get it if you do this. And so I think I have a combination, Jay, of both kind of mentors and um, horrific stumblings.
I,
And
I,
so,
I would just, you're not the only one. I would say I'm right in that boat too.
And I believe that every person's listening to this podcast, wherever they're at on their progression, it's just a good reminder that maybe I don't need to take myself so serious. What I do is important. Their well-being is important, but calm down. I'm not the hot stuff.
And I think there's an important lesson here, and it takes a lot of humility to explain what John just said, because a lot of us that came up through EHS, we weren't fortunate enough to, hey, we landed that manufacturing job and grew our career. A lot of us came out into loss prevention, auditing, insurance brokerage houses that were outsourced to do that sort of thing. I'm one of them. And we had to learn those lessons the hard way. So I appreciate what John's saying there. I think a big chunk of the population of EHS people have gone through something similar and could watch this podcast and say, you know what? Here are these experienced people, these subject matter experts who've been through it. They're telling us not to do this, and they can learn at a much earlier age and be more effective, efficient for the future in EH&S.
And there could be some people who have been going the same way through the years and just haven't saw the light to say, wait a minute, maybe it's me. And John, I thought of another principle that's Carl used. He said, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing other people. And there's something about that people value when you and I are honest enough to be open and say, well, I didn't know that. I'm glad to know that. Or you helped me learn something I didn't know. And I heard of someone say one time about a manager. One of the things that happens when you're a manager is you become the discussion point of dinner at nighttime with your family. Because how many times do people say, oh, you wouldn't believe what this guy Jay said today? Or, this guy named John, he actually stood there and asked me what I thought about something. And the question is, how do we want to come across to people?
We want to come across to people as interested and want to be educated and want to learn from them and always ask open-ended questions. The more open-ended questions a safety professional asks, the better that relationship is going to be. I don't know what would you say about that, John?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Look, here's the thing: is when you walk in the room, you're probably not the smartest, but you're probably not the dumbest. We're always somewhere in the middle, right? And I know that's a little blunt, but the point is that there's always learnings associated with everything you do every day. I don't get whether it's your home, your job, your church, your basketball game, well, your sports club, whatever you do. There's always learnings. And so when you go into it, you should have that open mind because someone can teach you something that you don't know. And so if you go into it, you talked about kind of continuous improvement, Jay, is continuous improvement isn't just process. We should have a shirt on that says, how can I help? Or here to learn, right? And let everyone feed into, if you go in with a helping heart, people will teach you, people will help you. And so we talked about, like, when you look at a relationship, if I come up before this podcast, Jay, and I see you in the street and I say, hey, I'd like $20. And you're like, look at this guy, he's kind of a bum. We're not giving him $20. But after the podcast, and now that we've seen each other, you still might not give me $20, but let's just play it out. And I say, hey, I want $20 from you, Jay. You'll be like, oh, that's John. Here's $20. And the reason why is because we have asked open-ended questions. We've created a acquaintance type relationship. And now when you hear me and when I hear you and when we have discussions, there's a connection. The connection happens with the open-endedness.
And it's safe. It's a safe space.
All right. Now, Jay, we have a friend named Ursel.
Shout out to Ursel, the man.
Yeah. He uses this illustration, and I'll say it quickly. He said, imagine you're sitting at home Friday night, you're kind of chilling out over the week. You're in the refrigerator. It's one of your favorite beverages. You can't wait to go get it. You're thinking about getting up, and all of a sudden somebody walks in your house that you don't even know. He goes to the refrigerator, opens up the refrigerator, grabs that bottle of a beverage, unscrews the top, and drinks it down. And you're sitting there thinking, horrified, well, who is this guy? What does he think he is? God doesn't know you. You don't know him. And he uses that in the realm of safety to say, how many times, John, do we go barge in on people who've been doing the work, and we're saying, dude, I'm taking over. You're going to do what I said. Is it any wonder that they're like, what in the bleep are you doing? And that's why that relationship is so vital.
The nerve of us to walk into a cell, a welding cell, and ask to see somebody's toolkit to make sure it's 5S appropriately.
Think of that bottle of beer in the refrigerator, whatever it is.
Wow. Yeah.
And John, but somehow we missed that. Now I do want to go a little bit different direction, though, just a tad, because, John, we've talked a lot kind of toward newer and up and coming. But could you talk about for a moment those people who've been in the role for a long time, who they've gained some gains, they figured some things out. Do we ever have to be careful that we don't get stuck and forget to learn because we've learned so much? What advice would you give to somebody been around for a while?
Yeah, I would say rotate. You need to find a way to rotate out of your role, even if it's on a developmental assignment or there's something at your company, or get there's a lot of groups out there where you can see other companies, right? And continue to learn in that relationship. And so if you cannot, when you think about when they groom an executive at any large company, how do they do that? They spend a little bit of time here. They spend a little bit of time here. They spend a lot, ops, HR, IT, and then eventually they announce, oh, so-and-so is going to be our CEO. But they all, if they homegrow them, they all spend time in these pieces, okay? In EHS, when you go to these conferences and when we're having conversations, and we're probably, we're all guilty of it too, depending on our background, we've been doing this for like 30 years. So what's your different exposure, right? And so you start to just, this is how I do it. And I'm not really exposed to anything else. And so I would just say I fall victim to not doing things differently because I just get comfortable. And comfort is the killer of growth. Easy, always. And so I think when you are trying to progress that development at a director, a VP, a senior VP level, what are the other inputs that you're bringing in so that you can understand, not, let's move out of the junior level or the mid-level folks. How do you understand the business? Do you know how many senior level people don't know what an EBITDA is? How to read a financial statement? A lot more than you think.
How many
And
safety
so
professionals know how to read a financial statement?
yeah.
Okay.
But you want to stay on the senior, so we'll just pick on senior now, and then we'll go back and no, I'm just kidding.
We'll work our way back. But how much should a safety professional know about finance, know about those numbers, understand all those other numbers? How vital is that, John?
It's critical, because ultimately that's the love language of profitability. And so a business that's not profitable is a business out of business, right? So just like when safety professionals, my opinion, go into it with this kind of zero risk tolerance, a no risk business is a not running business. You cannot have, zeros across the board. So you have to figure out where your prioritization is.
I don't think I can add to what John has already said. I'm still stuck on his EBITDA statement, which is just to come back to that, is 100% true, because not only do you got to know the health of the business, if you're making decisions at your level in the organization about safety and not knowing the tone of the organization and its profitability and where it stands right now, then you're missing kind of an ecosystem of influence where you may fall into a trap of he's not reading the tea leaves. He doesn't know what's happening in the organization. He doesn't know that the priority right now is we got to get this line up and running, or we're going to suffer an EBITDA disaster. We're going to suffer a revenue growth problem. We're going to get hit by the market responding to our quarterly release. And then what? And you're not reading the tea leaves if you're not understanding that part of the business.
And the credibility
right down the tube
goes down. Okay, John, let's go a little different direction. Do you manage a staff that's all under one roof, or do you manage, how many people are you guiding, and how close in proximity are they to each other?
So we are in 7 different states, and there's 150 people on my team. So they're kind of spread out all over.
Could you talk to, some people do not have that size of group organization they work with, but some do, and some are somewhere in between. Give us some tips, advice, lessons you've learned about guiding a team that's broad and multiple people.
Yeah, I think, it goes back to kind of what we've been talking about. Humility, authenticity. And I know these are very bumper sticker words, but there's a lot of truth to them. It used to be servant leadership. They all still apply. And so when you're managing large teams, so it's not just the likability of your field crews, but your team also hopefully likes you as well and thinks that you have their best interests, kind of on the forefront of your mind. And so what we, do here with my team is, we have kind of compartmentalized meetings where once a month we have an all hands. They get raw, unfiltered, transparent information from me about health of the company, where we're going, potentially which, management consultant we're working with to look at how to optimize costs, and that there might be adverse consequences there. But they know that they can come to me, ask me any question, might not like the answer, but they're going to get an answer. So there's this authenticity that I try to pride myself on, because if you again go back and put yourself in someone else's shoes, let's go the management consultant route. We won't share the names, but there's a bunch of them, and they come in and the say, okay, we might be able to operate 25% less resources than you currently have, and that's what our benchmark says, right? Do you, as an employee, do you want to be aware of that so that you can know that your leader is working through those challenges and having conversations and putting the organization in the best spot to respond? Or do you just want to come in one day and there's a sheet of paper on your desk and your manager standing there and you're just blindsided, right? And so your team needs to know that you have their intentions, their best intentions, even though you might not be able to determine all the outcomes, especially at a large corporation. But they know you got their back. And so, luckily for me, because of those stumblings that I mentioned with Jay and my kind of, my own internal redesign on how I approach things and where I'm at in my, personal and professional life, I take interest in my people. And so I know what's going on with them, both to the extent that they'll share personally and professionally.
John, with knowing your people the way you're describing, do you ever come up with creative intelligence amongst the organization that you weren't aware of from the position you're sitting in? Like you found out, oh, there's a new initiative, a new project going on at these 7 locations I wasn't quite sure of. So were you reading the tea leaves from your relationships with your team?
Yeah, all the time. I think sometimes like in the management consulting world, they say, "Hey, did you know such and such company is at such and such a plant?" It's like, "No, I didn't know that." Right. And so, when you think about effective strategies, it's top down, bottom up, right? And so my approach, or what I lean towards anyway, is really more bottom up, because ultimately the people that do the work, the people that are in the field, the people that are engaging every day are actually going to have better information sometimes than as you wait for it to kind of go through the dilution, cascading, whatever term we want to use, from the top. And so, short answer to your question, Jay, is all the time, all the time.
Me too. And it's fair, and you wouldn't think it would happen, but it does. It does. You learn from the bottom up constantly.
That transparent, authentic relationship will get your people wanting to tell you things that they may not have told other folks. A lot of times people come in and say, are you sure you're from this organization? Like, your approach is very different, John. And on inside, somebody is that good thing? Is that bad? I'm not sure. I guess I'm still figuring that out. But it's different. And the difference is engaging your people to deliver the result.
Well said.
Now, when I heard what you said there, John, I thought what you've just illustrated is how people are responders. And the way we are and the attitude we adopt and the perspectives we take, people respond to it. And we wonder sometimes, well, why don't these people do what I want? Why don't they be more open with me? Why don't they do that? It's because we have created that, and they are just responding to who we are. And that's why it's important for every one of us, no matter what our role is, that idea of who we are leads to what we do and leads to the results of the people. So there has to be an internal examination. Am I what I need to be to my people so that they can respond properly? And I know we all have the choice. We do make the choice. But why don't we live in such a way that makes that response easier for them?
Yeah, well, and I think response matters, right? So like how you react. So if you take this, okay, so pull this out of the professional world, if both of you have kids, right? If your kid comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got this issue," right? And they get negative consequence, negative consequence, negative consequence. Pretty soon, guess who doesn't come to you anymore? Your kid, right? And I'm not saying that our employees are our kids. Don't read into this, anybody. But what I'm saying is that if you're not open and receptive to working with your team and being authentic, guess who doesn't come to you anymore when they have a challenge? Your team. And so, I mean, that is a problem, because now you're making decisions on half-baked information, which ultimately is not going to be successful.
Yeah. And you're blind to it. And we can blame the people, but it's us that did it. And that's why. Well, there's been a lot of good stuff right here today. And John, I'm going to ask you to think up as you're summarizing things. If you were talking to a group, which you are right now, if there are a couple of high points perhaps to summarize, or maybe even something you said I'd like to get across that it didn't, what would you share with the audience?
Yeah, I think understand that your success is not actually dependent on your abilities, but others' abilities as it's integrated into your approach. And so having relationships, being curious, lifelong learner. And the other thing is that if you're early in your career or later in your career, if you get a paycheck on Tuesday, on Wednesday, you need to be getting a mentor. You should be actively seeking a mentor. And so if finance is your thing, then maybe that's not as important as HR. If IT is your thing, then maybe finance is where you need to go. And they don't have to be, CFOs, COOs. There's a lot of great information up and down an organization. And so what I would say is 50% of your mentors should come from internal your company, 50% shouldn't be at your company. And so, but get a great mentorship. I think, what was it? Jim Rome had a quote about, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around, right? I think this is a famous quote. So who are you hanging around? And how does that relate to your ability to be effective? And so your effectiveness is dependent on other people. So don't go in thinking you know it all.
John, thank you for being real with us, and thank you for telling from your heart and exposing some of your life experiences that taught lessons, and just reminding us, for all of us, that someday that as we are talking to other people, we'll look back and say, I learned this from that person. I learned this from this person. I learned these things and they helped me be a better me, so we could make our people and our organization even better. Thank you for being that kind of person today on this podcast.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Jay, there were a lot of statements and words that John just shared. There's a couple that stand out to me. The word humility. Humble enough to learn from other people. And then he kept saying over and over again, relationships, relationships, relationships. That's where it's at.
Clearly a great people influencer. A takeaway for me, talking to John, especially with his energy, excitement, and delivery, rules without relationships equals rebellion.
Thanks for listening to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast produced in partnership by Dale Carnegie and BCSP, with your hosts, Dale Carnegie Master Trainer Merle Heckman and Jay Harf, Vice President of Global Environment, Health, Safety, and Sustainability at Xylem. Executive produced by Charlie Eltringham. The supervising producer is Joel Burgai. Directed by Jiachi Liu. Edited by Jared Griot and Kyla Anderson. Editorial support from Brandon Mohawk. Social media support from Braylon Morgan and Evelyn Baku. Consulting producers are Colin Brown and Mark Sullivan. To have new episodes delivered directly to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. If you would like to share your story of a safety leadership challenge you faced, email us at info@mybigsafetychallenge.com. See you next time.